The 7-test farmer's method to pick ripe melons every time. Never waste garden produce again. Most gardeners buy their melons. They show up at the market, stand there confused, and grab whatever looks biggest. But what if I told you the secret isn't figuring out which melon to buy? It's learning to grow melons so good that you'll never need to rely on that guessing game again. The real test isn't what you do at the produce stand. It's what you do in your garden from the moment that seed goes in the ground. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why most home gardeners get watermelons that taste like water, and exactly how to flip that around using one overlooked technique that old-time American farmers use to guarantee ripeness every single season. If you're growing anything in your garden right now, I'd love to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me what you're working with this year. Tomatoes, beans, cucumbers, whatever. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the place to learn the methods that actually produce food worth eating. Subscribe now. Wait, this part matters because it changes everything about how you approach melons in your own garden. The whole idea of testing melons by thumping, by weight, by looking at the field spot, those methods work. They do. But here's what they don't tell you. They're tests for melons someone else grew. They're damage control. They're you trying to pick the least bad option from a pile of mediocre fruit. But if you're a gardener, you're not supposed to be at the mercy of someone else's harvest. You're supposed to grow your own. I've put together a complete guide on everything behind this. The soil conditions, the variety selection, the exact timing of when to harvest from your own plants, and how to know in your garden exactly when that melon is ready to come off the vine. It goes far deeper than I can fit in a single video. You'll find that guide in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. It covers the full system. The reason most home gardeners end up with pale, watery melons comes down to one mistake that seems innocent, but ruins everything. They plant the melon, they water it, they wait, and somewhere around 70 to 80 days, they make a guess about when it's ripe. Usually they guess wrong. The old method wasn't complicated, but it required one thing: attention. Not obsessive attention, just the kind of attention a farmer gave to any crop that mattered. You plant your melon, you watch it grow. You mark the day the flower falls off and the fruit begins to swell. From that moment, you're counting. Most varieties, and I'm talking about standard watermelons like Crimson Sweet, Charleston Gray, or any of the old heirlooms that American families grew for generations, need about 30 to 35 days from flower drop to full ripeness. Not 80 days total from planting, 30 to 35 days from the moment that fruit appears. Here's the part that changes everything. You don't wait until day 30 and then guess. You start checking at day 25. And you're checking for something very specific that only happens when the melon is getting close. The tendril. That's the small spiral vine that grows right next to where the melon stem connects to the main vine. When that tendril is green and fresh, the melon is still young. When it starts to brown and dry out, not completely dead, just starting to turn papery, the melon is approaching ripeness. But it's not there yet. When that tendril has completely dried to a crisp brown and fallen away, you're in the window. That melon is ready within days. Now, I'm not saying you pluck the melon the moment the tendril falls. What I'm saying is you've just entered the final phase. From here, you use the other tests. The field spot becomes important. The weight matters. The sound changes. But that tendril is your signal that it's time to start paying attention. Your signal that all the sugar work is nearly finished. The old farmers didn't carry clipboards. They didn't have apps on their phones, but they knew their plants. And this knowledge came from one simple habit. They looked at the same plant every few days. The same one, not a random melon from the pile. The same melon they were watching mature. In your garden, pick one or two plants to watch closely. Walk past them, notice when the flowers come. Mark that day, then count forward. Around day 25 from flower drop, start checking the tendril and the field spot. That's the rhythm. That's all it takes. And here's the honest part. Sometimes you'll still cut open a melon that isn't perfectly ripe. The seeds might still be mostly white instead of completely black. It happens. But if you're starting with a melon you grew yourself, in soil you built, with water you controlled, the chances of getting something watery and pale are almost zero. You're not trying to pick the best out of a bad lot anymore. You're harvesting something you grew specifically to be good. Now, before we go further, I need you to understand something crucial about what we're building here. The 7 tests I'm about to walk you through aren't just tricks for the grocery store. They're a complete system. And if you want to master them completely, to know the exact signals of ripeness so well you can spot them in any light, on any melon, at any stage, the full breakdown of how ripeness develops, what each test reveals about the melon's actual sugar content, and how these signals change depending on variety and soil, all of that is in the guide I've put together. It's in the description and pinned in the top of the comments. That's the place to go if you want the real depth. But here in the video, we move forward. Test number 2 is the tendril. On the vine, right at the stem where the melon connects to the plant, there's a small curled leaf. It looks almost like a tiny spiral. That tendril is alive while the melon is still growing. It's green and supple and holding on. Once the melon reaches full ripeness, the plant stops feeding it. The tendril dries out. It turns brown, it shrivels and loosens its grip. When you're at the stand or in your own garden, look at that tendril. If it's brown and crispy and pulling back from where it attached, the melon was left on the vine long enough to ripen properly. If the tendril is still green and fresh and firmly attached, the melon came off too early. It was interrupted before its time. This test matters because it tells you something the field spot doesn't. The field spot shows you where the melon was sitting. The tendril shows you the plant's own signal that the melon was done. The plant itself was done feeding it. Test number 3 is the give. This is where touch comes in. Hold the melon in both hands, not too hard. Press gently on the side opposite the field spot. A melon that's fully ripe gives slightly under that pressure, not much. You're not pushing into soft fruit like a peach. You're feeling for a very subtle yielding in the flesh just below the skin. An underripe melon feels hard all the way through, like a bowling ball. Press on it and nothing gives at all. An overripe melon, one that's been sitting too long, feels mushy or hollow or has soft spots that yield too much. What you want is that middle ground, gentle pressure, slight resistance, a little flex, then firmness. This test takes practice. When you're learning, do it on melons you already know. Buy one you've cut open. Know whether it was ripe or not. Then test that same melon a few times so your hands remember what ripe feels like. Your fingers will learn faster than your brain will. Test number 4 is the thump. Some people call it the knock. You tap the melon with your knuckles, usually on the flat side where it grew. A ripe melon sounds hollow. Not like you're hitting wood, like you're knocking on the outside of something that's empty inside. A deep, resonant thump. Underripe melons sound dull and flat, like knocking on soil. Overripe melons sound thin and almost papery. The challenge with the thump is that it depends on your ear. It depends on the melon's actual shape and wall thickness. 2 melons of identical ripeness might sound slightly different because one is rounder and one is more oval. So don't use the thump alone. Use it alongside the other tests. Test number 5 is the weight. Pick up the melon. It should feel heavy for its size. A ripe melon is full of juice. Water is heavy. So a watermelon that's genuinely ripe, full of sugars and water and ready to eat, weighs noticeably more than a melon of similar size that came off the vine early. This is a test that requires baseline knowledge. You can't do it in isolation. You have to feel multiple melons of roughly the same size and notice which ones are heavier. The heavier one, in almost every case, is going to be the riper one. Lift 3 or 4 melons before you settle on one. Your hand knows the difference between a melon that's been on the vine for 12 weeks and one that came off at 10. The ripe melon pulls your arm down. The early one feels almost hollow. Before we continue, I want to make sure you have the full picture here. The tests we're working through, the field spot, the tendril, the give, the thump, the weight, they're the foundation. But they're not the whole story. The deeper mechanics of melon ripening, the varieties that behave differently, the soil conditions that affect sweetness, the timing windows that old growers use to track by the lunar calendar, all of that lives in the guide we've put together. You'll find it in the description and it's pinned in the top comment. That's where the complete framework lives. Test number 6 is the shape. A ripe watermelon has presence. It looks full. The body is symmetrical. Neither end is pinched or tapered. When you look at it from above, the shape is balanced. Round ones should be evenly round. Oblong ones should be evenly oblong. An early melon often looks slightly compressed or uneven. One end might taper toward the stem where the sugars haven't distributed evenly through the flesh. This happens because the plant pulls resources toward ripening for weeks, and if you pick before that process finishes, the entire melon hasn't swollen into its full form yet. The old growers walked through fields and fields of melons before harvest. They learned to recognize the look of a melon that's done ripening. The shape tells you something your eyes recognize before your brain has language for it. Test number 7, the final test, is the webbing. Look at the surface of the melon. You're searching for fine lines running across the skin, thin white or light tan lines like a net or a web. That webbing appears as the melon ripens. The skin begins to crack and then heals. The melon repairs itself. Each crack leaves a thin scar. These scars are the melon's map of its own ripening. The more webbing, the longer the melon sat on the vine. More time on the vine means more time for sugars to accumulate. A melon with heavy, pronounced webbing is usually sweeter than a melon with barely any markings at all. A smooth melon with almost no webbing is likely early. This test works best in combination with the field spot. A deep golden field spot paired with heavy webbing is the combination that tells you everything. You've found the melon. So here's the sequence. Pick up a melon, turn it over, and check the field spot first. That's where most of your decision happens. Then feel for the tendril. Press gently on the surface. Listen to the thump. Lift it to feel the weight. Look at the overall shape. Trace the webbing with your thumb. All of this takes 90 seconds. Less once you've done it 3 or 4 times. A farmer's wife didn't need to think through these steps. Her hands knew what to feel for. Her eyes knew what to look for. The knowledge was in her body because she'd been doing it since childhood. You don't have that muscle memory yet, but you will. After you've picked 5 melons using these 7 tests and cut them open and tasted them, your hands will start to recognize the feeling. Your eyes will start to recognize the look. The tests become automatic. Most people think this is where the work ends. They've learned the 7 tests, they've done them a handful of times, and they figure they're done. They're not. There's a gap between knowing what to look for and knowing what it means when you find it. A pale field spot doesn't tell you much if you've never seen a golden one. A melon that feels heavy means almost nothing unless you've held a light one in the same hand and felt the difference. This is the part that takes time. Honest time. Not years, not months even, but weeks of actual practice. And I don't mean studying melons in the grocery store and then walking away. I mean buying melons, cutting them open, tasting them, remembering which one had which characteristics. Building a catalog in your mind of what worked and what didn't. The field spot of the melon on the left was pale yellow. See the flesh? Almost white pink. The seeds are still partially white. That's the melon you'll regret buying. The one on the right came from a deeper golden spot. The flesh is dark red. The seeds are black. Taste is completely different. One is $2 worth of compost. The other one is what you paid for. Hold on, I need to pause here for a moment. Because this is where something crucial happens that most modern gardeners miss entirely. When a farmer's wife was learning these tests as a girl, she wasn't just picking melons for her family's table. She was also growing them. She was seeing them on the vine. She was watching them ripen. She was digging in the soil around them. She understood the whole cycle, not just the final moment of selection. That changes everything about how you read the signs. When you know what a melon plant looks like at 7 weeks of growth, you recognize what a properly developed field spot means. When you've watched the vine wilt during a dry spell and then recover, you understand why weight matters so much. The knowledge isn't disconnected facts, it's a web of understanding that connects the field to the table. Now, if you're growing your own melons in your backyard or in raised beds, you have something that grocery store shoppers don't have. You have direct access to that whole cycle. You can see exactly when the flower opens and when the fruit begins to set. You can watch the field spot develop week by week. You can feel the vine when it's still actively pushing energy into the melon and when it's started to pull back. Growing melons teaches you how to pick melons better than any amount of store practice ever will. The complete understanding of melon ripeness, the ability to grow them and pick them and know with absolute certainty when they're ready, that's all detailed extensively in the guide available in the description and pinned in the top comment. It covers the soil preparation, the watering schedule specific to melon development, the exact timing of when each of these 7 tests should change as the melon matures on the vine. It's the deeper knowledge that turns these surface-level tests into something that becomes genuine skill in your hands. But here's what matters right now today. If you're at a produce stand or a farmer's market, you have everything you need to pick a good melon. Not a lucky melon, a good one. A melon that was ripe when it was harvested, that has been stored properly, that will taste the way a melon is supposed to taste. The field spot, the tendril, the gentle give, the sound, the weight, the shape, the webbing. 7 observations, 90 seconds. That's all the time it takes to know before you pay. One more thing that's worth saying. These tests work because they're based on how melons actually ripen. Not on tradition for its own sake. Not on superstition. The field spot changes color because of actual chemistry happening in the rind. The tendril dries because the vine has genuinely stopped investing energy in that particular fruit. The thump changes because the internal structure of the flesh solidifies as sugar concentrates. These aren't secrets that only farmers know. They're simply biology that any person can learn to read once someone shows them where to look. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning, not the 7 tests themselves. You can find those written down anywhere now. The real secret is this. Every person who grows food or picks food has always known that ripeness leaves a trace, a visible mark, a weight, a sound, a color shift, something you can read with your own senses the moment you decide to pay attention. Your grandmother knew it. The farm wives knew it. Elias Coder's wife Esther knew it because someone who loved her took the time to show her what to look for, and now you know it too. The difference between the two of you is not luck. It is not money. It is not access to better melons. It is simply that one person learned to read the melon and the other one did not. You are now the person who reads it. You walk into any market, you spend 90 seconds on a single melon, and you know. Your family eats sugar, not disappointment, not compost. But there is something else worth understanding here. These 7 observations only work if you actually use them. Knowing is not the same as doing. The field spot only matters if you turn the melon over. The weight only tells you anything if you have felt other melons in your hands first. The tendril dries only if you know what a fresh green tendril looks like in the first place. Knowledge without practice is just trivia. And trivia does not feed anyone. Here is what I want you to do this week. Find a place that sells watermelons. A market. A farm stand. A grocery store. Take 30 minutes. Pick up melons, not to buy them, just to feel them. Turn them over. Look at the field spots. Notice which ones are pale and which ones are golden. Feel the weight of different sizes. Listen to the thump. Do not make a purchase, just practice. Your hands need to learn what these markers actually feel like and sound like when you are not under pressure to make a choice. Next time you buy a melon for your family, you will know exactly which one to choose. The old way of doing things has value not because it is old. It has value because it works. Because it is based on how the world actually operates. Because it gives ordinary people the power to make good choices with their own senses and their own judgment. Every test in this method is something your ancestors relied on. Your great-grandparents stood in exactly this position, looking at piles of melons, knowing how to choose. They did not have internet guides or video tutorials. They had their eyes, their hands, their ears, and someone who taught them to use those tools well. You have all of that now. The knowing is complete. One last thought. These 7 tests will never fail you. Not because they are magic, but because they are honest. A creamy field spot cannot lie about ripeness. A tendril cannot pretend to be alive when it is dead. A melon cannot fake its own weight. The methods work because they are rooted in biology, not in hope. The next time you stand in front of a bin of melons and feel that moment of uncertainty, you do not have to guess. You do not have to tap helplessly and listen for a sound you cannot name. You have 7 specific things to check. 90 seconds. And when you cut that melon open at your family table on Saturday afternoon, the flesh will be deep red. The seeds will be black. The taste will be sweet enough that your children will ask for another slice. That is what the old farmers knew. That is what you know now. Thank you for watching today. If this method changes the way you pick melons this season, I would genuinely love to hear about it. Leave a comment below and tell me about the best melon you have ever chosen, or the worst one you learned from. Subscribe so you do not miss our next video on seed-saving tomatoes the old Appalachian way. Hit the notification bell and you will know the moment we upload. I will see you next week.